All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. We have a little different random ad hoc video here. I'm joined by DeAngelo Garrett. Hello, DeAngelo.
How's it going, Andy?
Going well. Thanks for coming by today. So
No problem.
I wanted to do a quick video. DeAngelo and I have known each other virtually on LinkedIn and through YouTube comments for, I don't know, a handful of years now.
Yeah.
And he and I have crossed paths a lot. I think a lot of it's been constructive. Some of it's been clearly we have some different opinions and views on some things. But more recently, I made some comments on a post from someone who was selling index universal life insurance using a chart, a 401k versus IUL or index universal life insurance chart. And I've seen iterations of this chart floating around for 3 or 4 years, if not longer, or since at least I've been paying attention. And I find lots of reasons to not like the chart and feel they're not valid. And I mean, I'll just be direct with it. I think it's unethical and dishonest to use charts like this. So I made some comments to this post a handful of days ago, and DeAngelo commented in response, and he and I sort of have a disagreement in views, and is this okay, is this not okay, here's why. So I thought it'd be helpful for he and I just to kind of discuss it. I don't know if it's debate style or what you want to call it, but just we'll pull up the chart, we'll kind of talk through it. I'll explain why I think it's not okay. He'll explain why he thinks it is okay, and we'll just let you all, everyone watching this, however you stumble across and find it, let you decide for yourselves what your take is, knowing that, here's his input, here's my input, and, you go from there, everyone else. So, sound about right, DeAngelo?
The overall explanation as we lead up to now, yes, I would say everything.
Right. Yeah, so far so good. All right, let me pull up screen share here, just so you all can see. Where am I? Okay, so this is the particular chart I'm referencing with regards to the post on LinkedIn from a handful of days ago. It's now mid to late January 2025. So this particular chart is new, but I've seen ones very similar or nearly identical to this in different forms and fashions and color schemes and whatever, but they all sort of have the same general points of comparison and comments on it. I guess I'll start by saying, and I'll let you, DeAngelo, then chime in, and we'll just kind of go back and forth here. But my overarching view and thoughts towards this are investable accounts, whether it's a 401k, a regular non-qualified brokerage account, a Roth account, health savings account for that matter, can never really be accurately and validly, if that's even a word, compared to a permanent life insurance product like an IUL. The two are fundamentally very different. They each have their own unique pros and cons, and these charts invariably are used to frame the comparison as IUL good, 401k bad. Look, IUL does this better, does that better, does that better, does that better. As you can see here, even like the visuals of this, 401k, red X's, IUL, green checks. So just like stepping back, neither product is good or bad. And 401k isn't really a product, frankly. It's just an account type that has certain tax characteristics, which is my other sort of issue with these, is that these comparisons are inherently leading the viewer or the reader or the watcher to think they're sort of conflating an account type with an actual investment. Like a 401k isn't an investment. It doesn't necessarily go up or go down. It's just a shell that holds investments. Whether you buy stock funds, bond funds, whether you let money sit in cash, whether you buy some sort of principal protected guaranteed income product, that dictates the returns, whether there's losses or not, et cetera. So there's a few things getting conflated, but just going back a little more, neither of these are inherently good or bad. Like I think IULs or any insurance product and any investable account, be it a 401k, brokerage account, whatever, a lot of people could benefit from having both. They could be complementary. So, it's sort of disingenuous in my view to say or frame it as if 401k bad, IUL good, better alternative, buy this product from me as a result. Now, I'm not saying that people who post this say buy this product from me, but I mean, let's call it what it is. The only time I've seen these charts are people selling IULs and very clearly using it as a framing tool to say IULs better than 401ks. I'll pause there for now. Comments?
Yeah. So the first thing in terms of just my overall thoughts on both, products is that essentially whenever I look at, IUL, 401k, IUL, even like you said, brokerage accounts, you could throw IRAs in there as well. I've always thought the comparisons were more so apples to oranges, just because the IUL at its core is an insurance product. It does have a death benefit, whereas a 401k does not have a death benefit. Doesn't make that I guess essentially that doesn't make the 401k, bad because it doesn't have a death benefit. It is essentially supposed to be designed that way as opposed to the IUL, whole life, or essentially any insurance product that does have that overall death benefit. But within saying that, like I said, although it is, more so apples to oranges, and, people probably should not necessarily compare the two because more so, like you said, both do have pros and cons, and that's just really any product. Like you said, IUL, whole life, 401k, IRA, brokerage account, health savings. You can even go all the way down to a basic savings account. Everything has its pros and cons, and people just kind of have to weigh that with whatever they are trying to more so accomplish, and essentially whatever their goals are. But I guess where me and you kind of got into more of a back and forth is okay on this particular chart. I didn't necessarily see a whole lot wrong with what was necessarily being said. Now, I guess I would say the only thing, well, I don't want to say the only thing, but essentially the one thing that pops out to me looking at it then and then essentially looking at the chart now, one side has the red X, the other side has the green check mark. So basically from a visual standpoint, yeah, it does make it seem like, one side is bad and the other side is good. But essentially on the different bullet points, as I look at them, I believe that the different bullet points are about as accurate as they line up towards each a product, or basically each account type.
Yeah. So I think we agree on that, like the visual depiction, the colors, the check versus the X, very clearly intended to say option A not good, option B good. 401k, IUL, whatever. And I, at a high level, I understand that framing and positioning, because when you're trying to sell something, a product, a service, or whatever, you want to show it in as good a light as possible. And a common argument or defense I hear from people is, well, this LinkedIn post only allows me however many characters, or this YouTube video needs to be limited to, whatever, a minute, 2 minutes, I don't know, whatever it is.
Right.
And so of course, they're not going to show all the drawbacks of the product or service they're trying to sell. They're going to focus on the good stuff. And that I get. I mean, that's sales 101. I can't knock anyone for that. But I feel that, again, using a chart like this, that doesn't mean that just because you have limited time or space to get your pitch out, that's not an excuse to use false, misleading, half-truth statements or comments, which I think this is riddled with. And, we'll go through it because you and I feel differently about that. You may be limited on time to get your point across, but you got to do it honestly, ethically, as thoroughly as reasonably possible, as fair as reasonably possible, which I think these charts are just completely, not any of those things. So let's get into that. And I think the first point that I had commented on that you had a comment in return to was the no guarantees part about 401ks. And this is one of my other hangups with these charts is the wording it can be massaged and very subjective. Like, what's it referring to? Guarantees, for example. And I think it's fair to say the person who made this chart is assuming the 401k is invested in stock funds or the stock market. Again, conflating like an account type, which is really just a tax wrapper, with actual investments. They're not making it clear, but I would bet someone's arm that they're assuming the 401k is invested in stock market funds. So with that said, I'm guessing that's what they mean by no guarantees is in reference to the performance, the potential return of what you're going to have in that 401k. There's no guarantees. The stock market can go up, it can go down, it can stay flat, or anything in between. To which I say, not true. Not all, but a large majority of 401ks have some sort of what's called either stable value fund or managed income portfolio. Essentially just a principal protected account. Loosely think of it like a savings account or a money market mutual fund. You put cash/principal in, your principal will not go down. It's only going to go up by some amount of interest. Oftentimes, these guaranteed interest products are actually run by insurance companies. They are, GICs, guaranteed investment contracts or something. So it is an insurance product belying it, which is never really mentioned or referenced here. Now, just because that's an option in a 401k doesn't mean everyone uses it. I do think a lot of people, I don't have data on this, but presumably most people in 401ks do have the majority of their money invested in stock market funds and stock market exposure. But it's false. Now, maybe I'm reading this too literally, but to say 401ks have no guarantees, that's false. Just simply because you have the option of guarantees with these stable value or principal protected funds. Thoughts on that?
So I guess, and I guess, as you had mentioned, this point right here was more so the point that more so kicked off our discussion via LinkedIn as well. And so essentially, as you explain that point, and I think I made this point clear on LinkedIn. Yes, I guess from a standpoint, theoretically, because you have those, what did you call those funds? The
stable value or managed income portfolio. They go back
like a money market,
basically,
market type fund.
Yeah.
Okay. So essentially, because the 401k does have those money market type funds within them, yes, technically, you do have some guarantees and everything as well. But however, the majority of people, especially when they're starting off in a 401k, are not going to probably allocate a lot of their funds to that particular fund. Conversely, with the IUL, most people in the IUL are not in the beginning. Now they could. I mean, I don't have eyes into everyone's account, but in the beginning, most people in an IUL are not going to allocate much of their funds, not unless you're kind of, every IUL structured a little different, not unless you're kind of forced to. Some companies make you keep a certain amount within that fixed account, but basically speaking, most people are not going to allocate very much of their funds to the fixed account as well. So essentially from that standpoint, and I think I had made this point to you as well, if someone were to put a post on, social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, there's a lot of Instagram videos out there, or TikTok, which is a platform I never used as well, probably one of the few. But essentially, if someone were to put a post out there and to say, okay, in an IUL, you are guaranteed every year to earn interest. I guess technically, if you allocate it to the fixed account, yes, you are guaranteed to earn interest every year, and you may not necessarily be guaranteed to earn the same amount of interest per year because the insurance company declares what the rate is every year. So sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes it's a little less. But essentially, but going back to the point, if someone put a post out there and said, hey guys, hey, the IUL is this great account, and guess what? You're guaranteed to earn some interest every year. I could only see what the pushback on that would be, most people would be thinking, okay, wait a second. Most, I guess from a subconscious standpoint, most people would be thinking, okay, most people are probably allocating to those index strategies, and those index strategies are not guaranteed to earn interest every year. So essentially, the pushback would be the same. Now, technically, like I said, technically, you could earn interest every year if you just put, some of your money in that fixed account or all of it. But most people are not doing that. And so I guess more so from a subconscious standpoint, no guarantees to guarantees as it relates to someone getting started within these accounts based off. I guess what I'm saying is that based off of the behavior that most people would essentially do. I mean, the 401k, like I said, technically, yes, you are right. But like I said, most people are going to allocate a large portion of their money to some sort of, fund that is more so going to grow in a variable state and everything as well.
Yeah. So in the literal sense of no guarantees, again, we're assuming the person who made the chart's referring to performance or potential return, which again isn't even clear, which is another issue I have, is these points are often subjective, open to be massaged. It's not clear what they're in reference to, but so I mean, it is inaccurate to say 401ks have no guarantees, or there's no guarantees available, right? And now, coming back to the point of there's only limited capacity and time and space to write that, but my view is, well, if you can't make an accurate reflection of it in what medium you're working with, regardless of the constraints around time or space, then don't do it, because it's unethical to do it, as is my view here. And even IUL, again, because it doesn't explain or label guarantees in reference to what, I can say, yeah, IULs are guaranteed to have the cost per $1,000 of insurance increase throughout your life. Yeah, that's a guarantee, but that's not a good guarantee, right? That should be read. So,
right.
So yeah, I agree. They have guarantees that your cost per unit of insurance will get more expensive as you age, but it's not saying that. So, massage, subjective. The people who make this clearly give the benefit of the doubt in interpretation and meaning to the IUL versus the alternative. So that's thoughts on the guaranteed one. Variable.
And just to come back, just to throw it, the cost of insurance. I never, the whole time I've ever looked at that. I mean, like I said, subconsciously, especially being someone that sold being someone that is sold IULs and things like that. Just the guarantee of the cost. That's why I kind of laughed there, because yes, you are correct. Like the chart does just say guarantees, and then it's like, okay, what guarantees of what?
Guaranteed what? Right, guarantee your cost.
So the IUL it has positive guarantees, but then I guess on the flip side, that cost of insurance, that's a negative, because nobody likes paying for. You got to pay for it, but nobody really likes paying for that.
Yeah. And just even that point as an example, if I wanted to intentionally make a chart that was misleading and visually would lead someone to think this is better than that, there's one example. We're only on bullet number one. Like, there's one example right there. I can say IUL, costs are guaranteed to increase, or at least cost per unit of insurance guaranteed to increase while you're alive. 401k fees, no guarantee it's going to increase. If anything, it could decrease. Right, like there's a lot of power in the subjectivity of how you massage and try to present and frame this. Okay. Variable. This sort of ties into the first one. I'm assuming the person who made the chart, they're saying variable in reference to the potential return of the investments that someone would choose inside the 401k, because again, 401k is just an account wrapper. It's not an actual investment in and of itself. We can belabor this point more, but going back to, no, it doesn't need to be variable. There's often guaranteed interest, money market fund type accounts in there. Now, technically, yes, those would be variable as well, because it's not guaranteed you're always going to get 4.2% or, whatever. The rate moves with the market level of interest rates, similar to how IUL is a fixed account, should you choose to use that, is going to fluctuate throughout the life of the product. There may be some floor, 2%, 0%, 1%, 2%, whatever the particular product has. But that fixed amount of interest is likely to change, not intra crediting period, but crediting period by crediting period, the insurance company reserves the right to change those things, subject to some minimum. So I don't know. I feel like this variable thing sort of ties into no guarantees. Like, no, it doesn't need to be variable. It could be, but often there's options for it not to be variable. Thoughts on that?
I think this one, where it's variable versus index. I think that this one, like as you said, it doesn't necessarily need to be variable. Like I said, most people are going, in the early stages, most people are going to allocate to some sort of be a 401k, some sort of target date fund. I think is what most employers kind of default you into. Unless you kind of go in and more so make that change yourself. But I think that this one, as it relates to the chart, variable versus indexed, this one is basically, or not basically, this one is true as it relates to both accounts. Now, however, I wouldn't say, for just me personally, when I look at it, I wouldn't say that that's necessarily bad for either account, because generally speaking, with an IUL, although there are some uncapped indexes, but there's something that comes with that. Generally, when you think of an IUL, or even an annuity, or when you think of an IUL or even an indexed annuity, the majority of the time, most of those indexed accounts have some sort of cap on them as well. But then in return, you're getting that 0% floor, versus variable, which doesn't have any cap. You can earn as much as the market will give you, but then also in return, you do not have that floor. So for me, this one, like I said, although the variable does sit on the side of the red X, this one, I don't think it's necessarily bad for either product. It's more so just a person's, I guess you want to say, risk tolerance, if you kind of want to put it in that. But like I said, theoretically speaking, because you do have those money market accounts that people can probably choose to allocate a portion of their money to. This one, I guess I would say I would more so have to concede that, okay, it doesn't have to be variable. But I guess, like I said, more so looking at it, most people are going to be in some sort of, variable fund, within a 401k. But in my opinion, that doesn't necessarily make that, bad or it at all.
Yeah, I agree. Even if we are assuming this is in reference to someone being in stock funds, yes, the return is going to be variable, could be negative. Like you said, that's not necessarily bad. It depends on the person, what they want this for, where this product fits in their overall financial plan, investment profile, insurance profile, risk tolerance, risk capacity. It's not. This comes back to why I think this is misleading. It's saying variable is bad, or the coloring and the schematic of this would lead you to believe variable is bad, index is good. No, not necessarily. Like, it's factual. Stock market returns are variable. Index products have index returns. Is one good or bad necessarily? No. Depends what you're using it for and what you hope from it. I would flip this around if I want to really try to pick things apart and say, I'd make the case that index is bad, especially for accumulators. Like, this is why, again, there needs a lot more context behind this. If someone's 25 and has 40 years of time on their side, I can't prove this without a crystal ball that works, but I'm inclined to say, and at least history has shown, if we pull data on this, that unrestricted exposure to the markets, and by the markets we'll just assume S&P 500 as a proxy, inclusive of the downsides in the down years along the way, would still out accumulate an index product because of the caps and the participation rates, which could be less than 100. And another big thing missing that this makes no mention of, in all index strategies, the return, the interest crediting that the product holder gets, does not include the return of the dividends from the underlying index that's being referenced. Whereas in actual fund investments, like buying an S&P 500 index fund, you will get the dividend return. Now, currently, the dividend of the S&P 500 is like 1.3% or something, which is tiny. But over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, that compounds. All else equal, not getting that dividend return over decades is really going to put a hamper on the ability of an indexed strategy to out-accumulate an unindexed variable strategy, even when factoring in the down years. Again, without hindsight and a crystal ball that works, can't prove that, but I think historically speaking, that's what would be shown. So again, not to say variable is bad, index good. It depends on your timeline, what you want this for, how much risk you're willing to take. Variable could very well out-accumulate an index strategy. So one isn't necessarily good or bad. The floor, the zero floor that index products have, there's a saying I've heard says zero is your hero. Like avoiding the losses is your hero. Well, you can flip it around and say the cap is crap. Like the cost of giving up some upside can hurt you potentially more than the floor of avoiding downside can benefit you. Again, this is all hypothetical. Like we don't know how future will play out, but over a long enough time period, especially because variable includes the reinvestment, the assumption you will get dividends where index you don't, that really adds up all else equal. So, all right, the tax one. This is one of the probably main points of comparison that people who sell IULs will make. And this is specifically why I think they pit IUL against 401ks or IRAs, anything pre-tax basically, because in pre-tax accounts, all the money in there is really just ultimately deferred income, not yet taxed income, where the account holder opted to defer the realization of taxation of that income until some point down the road when they eventually take money out. Therefore, all distributions from traditional pre-tax 401ks, traditional pre-tax IRAs, will be included in the person's gross income in the year of the distribution. Hence, the pay taxes on retirement, whatever that means. Like you're not paying taxes on retirement, you're paying taxes on distributions from the account.
Right.
But even then,
I guess it should say pay taxes in retirement, but
yeah. So I mean, I'll let that one slide. But attention to detail was lacking on this one. So it's true that distributions from pre-tax accounts will be included in your gross income and therefore potentially taxable. Not always taxable. Again, now some people say I'm nitpicking here, but I do have clients where they're in such low tax brackets because they just stopped working and their wages went away. They haven't yet started Social Security. They haven't yet started a pension. All they have is a few $1,000 of dividend and interest income, for example. We often do pull money out of their pre-tax IRAs, 401ks, and it's taxed at zero because of the standard deduction. So, now granted, that's an extreme scenario, but it's possible that at least some of the money in your pre-tax accounts could be taxed at nothing or really low, like 10 or 12%. But that aside, fully acknowledge that money distributed from these pre-tax accounts is included in gross income and hence flows in your tax return to your taxable income number at the bottom of the return. However, you can't, in my opinion, make that comment, or you can't bring to light that attribute and hold it against pre-tax accounts without necessarily making it clear that, well, it's taxable simply because the person never paid tax on that money yet. Whereas with the life insurance policy, all the money you pay into it has to have already been taxed. You can't put tax-deferred money into it. Right. So yes, while the tax on the back end of a pre-tax distribution is non-zero, likely, you never pay tax in the first place. Money you put into an IUL, you had to have already paid tax on that money. So $10 going into a 401k isn't the same as $10 going into an IUL, right? Because the $10 into an IUL would have needed to be like 12, 13, 14 before tax because you have to pay tax on it to have $10 left. Whereas the 10 that goes into a 401k is all gross money because you're not taxed on that in the first place. You're deferring the taxation. So that's my thought on pay tax on retirement. I have some other thoughts about tax advantage retirement for IUL, but what are your thoughts about this one?
Yeah, so this one, my thoughts on this one is that once again, and I know I keep going back to saying generally speaking that most people, which I'll go back to that again. So essentially on the 401k side, the majority of people who have not paid their taxes when the money went in. When they do take those distributions, they will pay some form of taxes,
Yes.
whether that be federal taxes, state taxes, if they are in a state that does charge a state tax and everything as well. In terms of the IUL, yes, everything funded into an IUL, that money has already been taxed. So essentially, which I know it's not quite the same way when you take money out of an IUL versus let's say like a Roth 401k or essentially a Roth IRA, because typically in an IUL, you basically then, I mean, you can choose to kind of do it I want to say within the IUL, you can basically kind of choose how you basically take the money, whether you basically take your money up to the basis and then essentially after that, it then basically turns into a loan of some sort as well, and that's kind of like essentially what makes it tax free. Which I just want to be clear to the audience. I know a lot of people watching this are already within the financial industry, but just clear to those that may not be. That's not just. I guess if I back up a little bit on the part where I said a loan, that's not just something that's only privy to an IUL. Like a loan in general, no matter where you take it from, is not taxed as well. Now, I guess so essentially, like I said, more so looking at the chart, it doesn't explain everything, but basically the way that I look at it, I don't necessarily look at it as being necessarily unethical or essentially misleading, because essentially at the end of the day, at least in my experience, anything that I've ever posted, whether it be LinkedIn, whether it be whether it be LinkedIn or on Instagram, I basically have not necessarily had a potential client necessarily just hit me up based off of a picture and say, hey, I want to buy. So essentially what that being said is that when I actually sit down with a client, that is where I can then further explain that, hey, the money that goes into an IUL, that money has already been taxed versus what is, sorry, audience. I get these moments where I pause and everything as well, but essentially what I'm saying is that versus the money that is going into your traditional 401k, where essentially that money has not been taxed yet, and everything as well. So at the end of the day, although these pictures like this may not necessarily explain everything, if you have a good agent or a good advisor, more so, these things are more so explained once you actually sit down with a customer and really can kind of dig into those nuts and bolts on the features and benefits, pros and cons, and different things like that.
Yeah, agree in concept that this is just a hook. This is meant to grab attention. This is meant to spark the conversation and interest. This isn't meant to be the comprehensive detail of how IUL works or how 401ks and investments within it work. Mm-hmm. So I agree that there should be a lot more description and explanation and mandatory disclosures and stuff like that. If the relationship progresses beyond just a prospective client seeing this chart. But my view is I do feel, for the points we've been mentioning, this is misleading. This isn't genuine. And so it's almost false pretenses. If, granted, no one's going to see this and call up and be like, I want to buy this policy today. Who knows? Maybe it happens, but let's assume it doesn't. This sort of false pretense that's hooking the client. And my view is if someone is willing to use this level of, frankly, I'll call it deception, in my opinion, with how they're positioning and framing A versus B here, I don't have a high level of confidence that that same person's going to be truly honest and thorough and genuine in how they're explaining the pros and cons in that closed door meeting. But I can't prove that. That's just my speculation, and I'll be the first to admit that.
Right, and I would come out and say that every as you know every agent is not good. That's probably the thing about our industry, particularly. I can't speak for the investment side of the financial industry as relates to advisors, but on the insurance side, that is probably, I would say, probably the number one downside is that every agent is not good. And then so essentially from a customer standpoint, because as you know, most customers don't necessarily have how would I say, most customers don't necessarily have the overall, financial knowledge that we do, just because, this is something we do every day. It was, just the basics of finance was not taught in school. So customers don't know how to look for certain things when it comes to, okay, that agent's a good agent, that agent probably not so good, and everything as well. So I will admit that there are a lot of agents that are not good. There are a lot of agents that are good, but from a customer standpoint, they don't know how to differentiate between the two. And everything.
I'd agree. Same on the securities, investment management, and planning side. There's some folks who, I don't say shouldn't be in the business, but aren't good, aren't impressive, aren't people I would want my mother working with, and it's hard to tease that out ahead of time. So. And I'm not talking about bad apples. Like Bernie Madoff was the biggest fraud of all time, who was an investment advisor, right? Who was legally bound to act in clients' best interest as a fiduciary. Well, scammers are always going to scam people, and fraudsters are always going to find ways to take advantage of people in all walks of life. But that aside, barring intentional deceit and fraudulent activities, there's lots of people all over the industry in various aspects of the business who just aren't impressive, aren't, in my opinion, I definitely wouldn't want to work with them. Another quick comment on this pay tax on retirement thing. Again, it's not necessarily bad, and why I think this is misleading is this person is painting it as bad. Example would be someone is a really high earner now in the 37% tax bracket, making good wages. They choose to put some money through a pre-tax 401k. They are deferring 37% income tax. Maybe they live in California where there's another 10, 12, 13% state tax. They are deferring income tax on that money they put in the 401k. Maybe they're retiring next year. Their wages drop to zero. Maybe they're moving to Texas or Florida or somewhere without a state income tax. So when they do take money out of the 401k, it's almost certainly going to be less than 37% federally. It's now going to be zero or potentially lower than what it would be in California. So paying tax on those distributions is a good thing for that person. They actually saved money, again, assuming they were in a high bracket to start with, which this chart doesn't say. Like you can't say you have to pay tax on withdrawals without necessarily making it clear that that's simply because you deferred tax on the money you put in. So paying tax in retirement could be a good thing in that example. And the tax advantage retirement of IUL, I know this is way in the weeds and beyond the scope of being able to fit into a graphic, which is why I'm saying like it almost shouldn't be allowed, because you have to disclose this, in my opinion. It's not clear. Again, it's massaging and giving the benefit of the doubt on this tax aspect thing to IULs over 401ks. All money that goes in has already been taxed. That's a point against it compared to the 401k where the money is tax deferred, and you kick the can down the road almost, for lack of a better word. And the tax advantage retirement, they're not saying it, but they're implying that that's because you're taking loans, like you said. You're getting income from this policy by borrowing against the cash value. You're paying interest on what you borrow. And like you pointed out, any form of loan, any form of debt, cash proceeds from borrowings are not taxable income because it's not income, it's debt. What this doesn't say is this thing could potentially blow up in even a worst case scenario where if you do have loans outstanding and your policy lapses for whatever the reason, poor performance, or you're not properly funding it or what have you, any loans outstanding in excess of the total amount you paid in will be taxable to you as ordinary income in the year of that lapse. Now, granted, that's a nuclear option that doesn't happen to most people, and shouldn't happen in a properly structured policy where there's things like a overloan protection rider that helps prevent that from happening. But still, it can happen. It has happened in policies. I don't know of IUL in particular, but like traditional UL, for example, I have a client with a VUL. Before I started working together, policy lapsed simply because they never paid attention to it in the 30 years they had it, or 20-something years they had it. So tax advantaged potentially, but also fully taxable, and not in a good way. On the other side of that, it's not making that clear. So, all right. Moving on, the market loss one for 401ks, we already beat this one to death already, but it ties into before. Yes, it's been stock market exposure, sure, it can decline. If it's in a principal protected thing, no, there's no market loss. So that one I'm going to say is false, or at least needs to be qualified, like market loss if in certain investments, which it doesn't say. The principal protection one, I have big hangups with this. So this one is, I think, intentionally getting cute with the concept of how cash value permanent life insurance works. I know what they're referring to. The principal protection they're referring to is the fact that the interest you get credited on your cash value can never be less than zero. Zero is your hero thing. You got the floor. Regardless how poor the underlying index performs, your return is floored at zero and never be less. Hence, they view it, or they call it principal protected. But this is sort of disingenuous because you can't own just the cash value of a life insurance policy without it necessarily being the secondary thing bolted onto what is first and foremost a life insurance. And there's rightfully costs and fees associated with that life insurance, and those costs and fees get deducted from your cash value unless you're actively paying money in which case it's deducted from that. But most of these policies are structured such that you fund it over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, then stop funding it, and then take loans throughout retirement. Well, in years where there is zero interest credited to your cash value, because again, the markets were poor, but you hit the floor, zero is your hero, there still will be costs and fees that come out of it that will reduce your cash value. So in my opinion, the accurate way to view what is your principal, what is your actual asset value in a permanent policy, it's the cash value. And that can go down because, again, you can't strip out the cash value component from the life insurance component and the cost and fees associated with it. If you want to do that, you basically have to buy an annuity or like a structured ETF or something, but it's neither here nor there. So principal protection is false. I think this is another one that needs clarification and caveats. The accurate thing will be to say you will never get less than zero interest on your cash value, but your cash value can decline, hence your principal can decline, hence it's not protected due to costs and fees of the policy. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so on this one, I always think of this one, which I believe in our dialogue on LinkedIn. I always think about this one more so as people are contributing into an IUL, whether that be for 10 years, 20, 25, or if you start it young enough, you may contribute for 30 years. Who knows? Everyone's different. But essentially, as it relates to market loss and as it relates to market loss and principal protection, assuming that the person assuming that the person in a 401k is in a variable fund, as they are contributing, they will have years, more than likely. I mean, of course, I can't see into the future of what the market's going to do. I don't know where the market's going to finish today or tomorrow or next week. But essentially, based on history, they will have years as they are contributing where they lose some of that principal. Doesn't necessarily happen often. Not saying it's going to happen every year, but they will have years where that does happen. Conversely, on the IUL side of things, as they are contributing, assuming that it is structured, correctly, because if it ain't structured correctly, you shouldn't be in it anyway. But essentially on the IUL side, if you are contributing, let's say for 25, 30 years, and you essentially contribute, on time, every time you are supposed to, don't know how many people would do that, each and every time, but figuratively speaking, if you're contributing on time when you're supposed to, in a properly structured IUL, whenever you do have that zero, you are not going to decrease your cash value in those years when the market is down, because you do have that zero. Now let's get to the part where okay, I guess what I'm saying is that so essentially, with that being said, let's get to the part where we're basically, okay, 25, 30 years has basically passed, and you're to the point where you're like, okay, I've basically funded this the way that I've, the way it was designed. I'm not putting anything into it anymore. From that perspective, in a year where you do get a zero, yes, that cost of insurance is still going to come out, which then does come out of your cash value as well. So I do see your point that basically this part right here could be a little bit misleading. I will give you that as well. And the reason I say that is because I've actually had people ask me like, hey, in an IUL, could I just take, $20,000 and just park it there? And I'm just like, well, no, this product's not the product to just take 20,000, park it there, and you're just going to let it sit there and never do anything with it. And so essentially, I would say basically other products are probably better going to serve you there. So that part of it, I would say is a little bit misleading. And going back to the people that have asked me that question, principal protection, that is why they asked me that question, because of the theory of the IUL having that zero on the downside as well. So I will say that part right there probably needs to be a little bit more clear, which, like in these pictures, you're not always able to necessarily do that as well. But like I said, figuratively speaking, as you are contributing into these, this picture is, accurate from that perspective. But then basically after you then stop contributing, at least on the IUL side, that principal protection part of it, kind of becomes a little bit muddy, which, IULs, which I know a lot of people don't read. I don't want to say a lot of people don't read, but basically like the policy, like when you get your policy, whether it be physical or you get it in a digital capacity, within the policy does say, may lose value. And I think that's what they're talking about. Like, hey, if you don't contribute, then the value of the cash value could go down. But like I said, I'm not telling clients to go read everything within there, because that goes back to, hey, you should have read the fine print, which it's up to us as the agents to disclose that. And to let people know, like, hey, whatever amount of money it is, not unless you're just putting maybe $1 million in up front, but if it's $10,000 or 20, this is not the vehicle to basically just park money and just leave it, because you'll park it there, and the tow truck will come and get it. So, right. If you want to use that analogy, so.
Yeah, like you said, if the policy, it says right in there, in the fine print of the actual policy, may lose value, like, stop right there. It's just simply not principal protected, full stop. The vast majority of people, especially consumers, have no idea how index products really work. And even when they do try to read through the dozens of pages of policy and riders, they're not going to get it. And I think many people who even sell this stuff don't fully understand it. To me, and can't prove this, but I think a lot of people agree, to the average person, when you say principal protected, they think, okay, I put X amount, excuse me, I put in X amount of dollars, I will always be able to get out at least X amount of dollars. I'll never be in a position where X is something less than X when I go to take it. That's principal protected to me, and I think most people, out there. So this one just doesn't sit well with me. And I flat out will say, I think it's false to say it's principal protected. I get your point about drawing a distinction between the accumulation stage where you're actively paying premium into the policy versus a decumulation stage where you're no longer funding it. Now you're just taking loans from it or not doing anything, just sitting on it.
Right.
But I also that doesn't jive with me, because you can equate that to investing in stock funds and saying, I had $100 in my account, but the investment's lost 10%. So my account value dropped to 90. Oh, but I paid in 12 on top of it. So my account value is actually 102. It went from 100 to 102.
Right.
So it's principal protected, right? It's like, no, you actually lost money. You contributing more money isn't principal protection. It's like you covering or paying in at least as much as what it lost. Now, to be fair, in the stock case, it was actual investment return that made it decrease. In the IUL, it would be costs and fees, policy fees that make it decrease. I think that's getting sort of cute with one's principal protected, one's not, but I don't know. That's my thoughts on the whole principal protection thing. Shall I move on from there?
Yeah. I mean, move on from there.
Age rules, 100%. Pre-tax qualified accounts have age rules. You need to be 59 and a half to take money out without 10% penalty, barring some exceptions. There are some exceptions to that penalty. That's a big one, obviously. There are also required minimum distributions. Depending what year you were born, you need to start taking money out of these accounts, a minimum amount when you're either used to be 70 and a half, then 72, now 73, soon to be 75. If you inherit one of these, there's a whole other quagmire of rules around how much you have to take out and when. So no doubt there are lots of age rules around pre-tax qualified accounts. Is that bad? Maybe, maybe not. Yes. I mean, it does place restrictions upon them. For example, again, 10% penalty if you're younger than 59 and a half. So yes, I can view age rules as all else equal. It's better to not have age rules than it is to have age rules, because it imposes upon you limitations and restrictions. IUL, no age rules. More true than in the case of qualified accounts. Still not necessarily universally true to say it as matter of fact. For example, in my own IUL that I own, there's an age rule around when I can invoke the overloan protection rider if and when I need it. I think I need to be 70 or so. I don't remember. But there's some age I have to be. It can't happen now I'm 47. So maybe this is nitpicky. And again, maybe people don't like when I look at things literally, but it is not accurate to say there's no age rules in IULs. I'm living proof that my IUL has an age rule. Now, I'm benefit of the doubt to the person who made this. That's not what they're referring to when they made this. They're referring to, no, you can surrender money out whenever. You can take loans out whenever. You don't need to be a certain age. There's no penalties if you're below a certain age. So that's where they're going with it. But again, this comes back to, I think they're getting too liberal and giving too much benefit of the doubt to IUL versus 401ks. Again, slap on the coloring of one's green, one's red. And simply put, again, to say no age rules as a definitive statement isn't accurate, because my IUL has age rules, just like saying no guarantees in a 401k as a definitive statement isn't accurate, because many 401ks do have guarantees.
Yeah. So on this one, I just look at this one. This one's just kind of more as it relates to each, product. This one's more so like black and white, just, age rules. Age rules more so, like you said, as it relates to someone taking some sort of some sort of distribution as well, right, versus the IUL, which does not necessarily have the age rule as far as a person taking a distribution, and more so being penalized by 10%, for not being 59 and a half as well. Now I will say, even though I'm more so on the proponent of the IUL side, I mean, if I mean, and like I said, you can look at things a lot of different ways. The IUL is not going to penalize you for taking money out, early, late, or what have you. Now, but the IUL does have, in most cases, not every policy or company, but in most cases, the IUL does have that a 10-year surrender period. So you're not necessarily penalized to take money out, but you may not have access to 100% of what your cash value is within that 10-year surrender period as well. So like I said, you could look at that. You could look at that maybe as some type of age rule. Like if you start off in an IU at 35 and you say, well, I'm not going to have access to the full amount. I'll have access to a portion. And then, as you get closer to that 10-year period, the amount that you have access to gets closer and closer to the amount of cash value you actually have. And then after that 10-year period, you essentially have full access to the amount of cash value that you have in there. Now, there are some companies where they actually have riders where you can actually have access to the full amount of the available cash value in year one. But, like I said, with any rider, that adds an extra cost onto the policy as well. But like I said, generally speaking, I think that this one is probably I would say this bullet point may be the one that maybe I'm looking at the ones below that, but this one may be the one where we're basically me and you probably have the least amount of disagreement, just because it's just out there. It's essentially is what it is. Doesn't necessarily, like I said, make one bad or necessarily good or anything like that. It's just it kind of falls into the pros and cons of each product.
Yeah, I think this point is the least incorrect, the least offensive of what's on here. Again, other than to say no age rules period isn't accurate, because mine has some age rules in it, but in regards to ability to take distributions or loans or surrenders out of it, correct, barring the surrender period, which you brought up. There's not like hard, you need to be X amount of ages or number of years or whatever. So agreed on that, more or less. The death benefits. This one is the most glaring example of comparing apples to oranges. IUL and any form of permanent life insurance simply is life insurance. Its primary purpose is when the insured dies, there is a death benefit paid out to the named beneficiaries of that policy. That's what it was meant to do. All this other stuff is just an ancillary secondary feature of building cash value, being able to borrow from it, having your interest credited based on indexing methods, etc. So IUL 100% primary goal should always be it's a death benefit product. Insured dies, you get paid out. Any form of investable account, brokerage account, bank account, 401k, IRA, doesn't matter. No, it's not life insurance. There is no death benefit. Like, full stop. Agreed. There's nothing to dispute there. But that doesn't mean it's bad. Again, now saying death benefit is green is good. No death benefit is bad is red. That's like sleight of hand, parlor trick, deception. You have a 401k with $500,000 in it. Like, that's your money. Again, that's pre-tax, assuming it's pre-tax. And another thing, this doesn't make a mention between Roth or traditional. The assumption is traditional pre-tax, but if it's a Roth 401k we're talking about, a lot of these things don't apply even more. But if you have $500,000 in an investable account, that's your $500 to do with as you please on anything. You don't need to die to use it. If you do die, your beneficiaries get that $500,000. Whereas with life insurance, you have a IUL with a $500,000 death benefit. You don't have $500,000 you can tap and use today. Maybe over time you do, depending on the policy and how it grows and how you structure it. But like, the whole point is your heirs get that $500,000 when you die. Like, until then, you don't have that. Versus a $500 401k, like, you do have that. So it's just a complete, shiny object. Like, look, death benefit. This one doesn't have a death benefit, which is really, really misleading. I can't dispute this point because it's accurate, but I'm saying it's not a good thing for IUL, bad thing for 401k. These are just functionally very different products. And this is the clearest example of these are very different things that have different components.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with you on this one. That this one is the apples to oranges. The statement that I'd made right at the very beginning. That this one is the most apples to oranges. The one thing I would say is that, which it kind of more so ties into the next bullet point, which is, like I said, once again, it's kind of apples to oranges when you get into the living benefits. But the one thing I would say on the death benefit is that if somebody has a $500,000 death benefit, they can use that while they're still living, but it's not money that's there to just it's not money like, say for instance, like if I start an IUL today and then I say Nationwide or whoever, the insurance company, or I'll just say insurance company, I want some of that 500,000 of the death benefit. No, it's not necessarily for that, but if it has living benefits attached to it and someone qualifies for one of those qualifying living benefits, then they can use a portion of that death benefit while they're still living. But the thought process is that if you have to use one of those living benefits, something negative has happened in your life, and so obviously people want to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible. So the thought process is that it's there in case, but at the end of the day, you would prefer not to use those living benefits and have to access a portion of that death benefit while you're living, as opposed to the other way as well. But I think that this one doesn't necessarily make one bad or the other. And also with the death benefit part, as we went to the principal protection part, that is why some of, like, especially in the years where you stop contributing and let's just say you get a 0, and they take that cost of insurance out of your cash value, you're giving that up to have that death benefit as well. So it's kind of like it's a pro, but then it's a pro on one hand to have the death benefit, but then a con, but a con to maybe take some of it out of the cost of insurance out of your cash value. However, like I said, I don't think that makes the 401k bad to not have that, because it's not designed to be, as you said, a life insurance product.
Correct. Yeah. Again, just biggest example of apples and oranges, and living benefits is associated with the fact that IUL has a death benefit. You only have the concept of living benefits if there's a death benefit to start with, right? Like in the absence of there being a death benefit, like a 401k with $500,000 in it, it's yours to do with as you please. You don't have to die to get access to take out to use the 500. You can use it on terminal illness or chronic care expenses. So like in my view, investable accounts are already inherently living benefits in the sense that the money's yours. Do with it as you please. A $500,000 death benefit in IUL, you only get that $500,000 paid out upon the insured's death, or if you invoke a living benefit like terminal illness or chronic care, then you're using some or all of that death benefit in life, as opposed to waiting to have to die to get it paid out to your beneficiaries. But it's not a good thing or a bad thing that IULs have that 401ks don't, because again, 401ks, you can use the money for whatever in the first place. Like, you're not limited, whereas the death benefit, you have to die to use it, or invoke a living benefit, or borrow against the cash value. But doing any of those things reduces the amount of death benefit that's going to be left to go to your heirs anyway. So, I feel like this is another example of, let's just jam in another green for IUL, red for 401k, but without knowing the context behind it. Like, this isn't a pro or a con. It just is what it is. It's functional differences that between two very different products. So. I would say the last two bullet points kind of go. They're the last two bullet points on both sides they're one and the same, but it's kind of like an extra. And actually, when I look at this, a few of these kind of just could have been condensed into one, really. But what is it, like? What are the seven bullet points? So Yeah.
Yeah, so a few of these could have been condensed into one as well. So I think overall we may look at it differently, but I think inherently just in our discussion now that we've had a chance to speak with one another, and I think it was kind of maybe some of that on whenever we were going back and forth on LinkedIn, but you're just kind of reading words, so you can't really.
Yeah.
Can't really see exactly, how, what, how the person's saying it. But I think now having this discussion, I think we agree more than we disagree. So maybe, if hopefully for the audience out there that was not a letdown to,
Right.
you probably were hoping that we were going to,
Jerry Springer, they want to see some chairs getting thrown. Yeah.
As well. But I think just on the small things, I think we just see the small things differently. But overall, the bigger issues, we actually more so kind of agreed on the bigger issues, and then just from the optics of the picture. Yeah, the optics of the picture, without even reading the bullet points, you see red and green, and then you assume one is good and the other is bad, and it's not that either one is necessarily good or bad. Like we said before, they both have their pros and cons, and so individuals just have to kind of weigh those out based on their risk tolerance, their goals, and or what have you.
Yeah. And I think I said this before, but I go so far as to say this chart or charts like this simply should not be used. Too biased, too misleading, too lopsided. Further, I think anyone who does use this in their advertising and marketing of IULs, I would not work with that person. Knowing this conversation that we went through, and hopefully a lot of people watch this and make their own decisions, but in my opinion, knowing how misleading, false, half-truth, massaged, biased this is, I would not work with someone who uses a chart like this. Either they don't fully know and understand and appreciate the nuances of these two products well enough to know this isn't a valid comparison to try to make, or even worse, they do understand that, and they're intentionally using this to try to be misleading and to really frame and sway people's opinions about, look at all the green checks here, look at all the red X's here, must be good, must be bad. Whereas I know you don't have that staunch of a view in someone using this chart, where to me, this is an absolute deal killer. If I ever see this, like right off the bat, I would never recommend anyone work with someone who uses this. But I know you have a much less harsh view than I do on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think the way that I look at it, and like I said, it's more so just a difference in the way we look at it. But in the way I look at it is that most people. I mean, I'm not going to say most people have 401ks or anything, because I don't know what most people do or don't have. But a lot of people. But here's what I'm saying. I would say a lot more people have a 401k through their job than they do have an IUL. A lot of people are not familiar with an IUL and what it can do. They probably never heard of it. And then two, it is life insurance. It is something you have to qualify for from a health standpoint. So 100% of the population is not even going to be able to get one as well.
Right.
So the way I look at it is that I guess whenever I look at it from a sales perspective, because I think even you had said it earlier, from a sales 101, you do have to basically highlight some of your more positives, especially whenever you're trying to put things out there. So the way I look at it is essentially. And like I said, it's kind of hard to do this when they're apples and oranges. But at the end of the day, it's essentially kind of differentiating the IUL from the 401k, because essentially, if people don't necessarily know what some of the features of the IUL, why would they ever buy one when a lot of people already just have a 401k? And the reason I say that is because I've literally had people. I guess what I'm saying is that not necessarily like in a closed door meeting, but just kind of out and about as you're talking to people, and you just kind of go over some. I guess what I'm saying is that as you just kind of go over just some basic, like, high level, highlights, of the IUL, I've literally had people basically ask me, hey, what is that? Is that like, a 401k, things like that. And so essentially the way that I look at this is that it's more so just kind of differentiating one from the other. So the people that, I guess what I'm saying is that, so the people that an IUL may be a good fit for, that could be something that they could basically add into their portfolio, as opposed to just kind of thinking, an IUL is the same. So basically, why get it? Because I already have a 401k as well. Yeah. But now I will close by saying this is that, somebody, if they know what they're doing, they should just be able to, I say all that, but then I'm going to come back and say this as well. So it a little bit contradicts a little bit of what I'm saying. But I will say, someone, because they are apples and oranges, someone should just be able to sell, the IUL without even necessarily talking about
right.
The 401k as well. And then essentially at that point in time, if the customer in the closed door meeting says, well, hey, I have a 401k, does it do that? And then that's when you can then describe, well, no, the 401k doesn't do that, but the IUL does this, or vice versa as well. So at the end of the day, a person should be able to just post. And the reason I'm putting my hand up, because I'm basically kind of like cutting the picture in half. A person should just be able to post and say, hey, IUL, here's the features and benefits, guarantees, indexed, or so forth and so on. And more so just kind of be able to, attract people that way as well.
Right. Because it is so apples and oranges. And I guess that's the ultimate gist of this. It's like there really isn't a way to make a meaningful, fair, valid comparison because they're so functionally different. I like that idea. Just pitch and explain IUL on its own merits, not in reference to trying to say an IUL has investment-like components, therefore let's compare it to an investable account. Just very different animal. With that in mind, I thought we'd end with some fun. Speaking of comparing apples versus oranges, and how if you try hard enough, you can make a comparison, but it ends up just being irrelevant and goofy. I found this on TikTok. I did not make this, but I thought this was brilliant. It's comparing a girlfriend versus the 2020 Lego Star Wars AT-AT Walker. And it goes point for point. A girlfriend constantly needs gifts and money, whereas buying the AT-AT is a one-time payment, then it's yours forever. A girlfriend might not be flexible, but the AT-AT is fully posable. Its legs articulate, its head can move. The girlfriend might lie to you. This AT-AT is the most accurate movie version of a Lego yet. A girlfriend can only hold a couple things, but hey, this AT-AT can hold not only your snowtroopers, but a weapon turret and a speeder bike inside of it. And a girlfriend can get hurt easily, but the AT-AT Lego is made from strong and heat-resistant ABS plastic. If I wanted to throw some colors on here, some reds and some greens, I can make it look like everyone should buy the 2020 Lego Star Wars AT-AT as opposed to have a girlfriend. Right. But we know that is just such a stupid, goofy comparison because these two things are so different. Now, granted, IUL and 401k aren't as different as these two, but this was all in jest. But I found this and thought this was funny because you can come up with comparisons for anything and massage them and force them to make something look like it's that much better than something else, such as the case here.
Right.
Anyway. All right. DeAngelo, this was awesome. Thank you very much for chatting. I wish more folks would be willing to do this. I do put offers out all the time to talk about this with whoever's interested, and you're one of the first few who actually took me up, and I thought this was a very fruitful, constructive conversation, and I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of watching it. So thank you.
Oh, I just want to appreciate you for extending the offer as well. And so, yeah, anytime anytime there's a topic, I'm sure there's people post things all the time, and there's always a debate going on in the comments as well. So yeah, so anytime that if there's like a disagreement or basically even an agreement or anything as well, if you want to reach back out, I'll be happy to come back on again.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. And thanks everyone for watching.